Thank you so much for watching us. We're in Bundaberg tomorrow night. Cannot wait. Now, normally we'd say send us emails, but we have a full house tomorrow night. So the best place to be is right there. We'll obviously tell you about the day in the news, and then we'll celebrate one of the great cities of Australia, Bundaberg, tomorrow night here on Paul Murray Live. Now, let's get straight into it with two people who I'm sure have sampled plenty of the fine Bundy rum over the years. None other than the wonderful Erin Molan, our colleague here at Sky News, and
Good
of course,
evening.
none other than Albo's chief spokesperson, Joe Hildebrand.
Yes, he told me to say hi.
Oh, yeah, please. Big kisses back. All right, now, let's talk about Albo on the world stage because, Aussie Joe got to meet real Biden. But amazingly, apparently the way that he's going to solve the issue when it comes to China is just to tell them, please take off the trade embargo, but please take away the trade restrictions. Erin, how did I not think of that? Just ask the Chinese to be nice and they'll be nice.
I know. If only Scott Morrison had taken that approach, hey, things might have turned out very differently. Look, it was interesting to see him on the world stage. He looked very excited, Anthony Albanese. He looked a little bit nervous. He looked very chuffed is probably the word that I would use, and understandably so. Look, to be honest, and I don't want to, fight you for the job of chief spokesperson, Joe, but I think he's done pretty well. He hasn't monumentally screwed anything up yet, and I think that's always a tick. When it comes to China, I think it was important that he came out and wasn't soft on the issue. We know that China, they're bullies, so they don't like people standing up to them, which is one of the main reasons they didn't have anything to do with the coalition. They seem to be courting Anthony Albanese. It feels almost like a dating show. They just keep throwing little things out there, hoping that he'll bite. I think we've just got to watch what he does now. I think it's too early to tell whether or not he'll do the right thing when it comes to not China, but the Chinese Communist government. We'll wait and see.
Yeah, look, Richard Marles, who knows, obviously he's still getting his homework marked by the Chinese. But important to see here, Joe, look, it is impossible for an Australian leader to screw these things up. But I tell you what, that moment when Joe Biden turns around and says, look, I know you've had a tough time if you want to have a sleep, is that just because he falls asleep at international meetings? He thinks everyone should have a nap?
I actually thought that's what it was. That's how I took it. I took it as this amazing moment of self-reflection where Joe Biden suddenly realised what the rest of the world was seeing. Look, I will simply agree with Erin. I don't think Albanese put a foot wrong. Even some of his stauncher critics, I noticed my doppelganger in the Australian, Greg Sheridan, doppelganger plus a decade or two, said that he did incredibly well, did perfectly well, couldn't fault the performance. Neither could I. I think in terms of telling China to lift the trade bans, well, even if he doesn't think that they'll do it, obviously, I mean, what else do you want him to do? Do you want him to roll over and say don't? Do you want him to say nothing? He was asked about whether the Chinese, or asked about the Chinese government's letter of congratulations, welcoming him to the role of Prime Minister. That was obviously a little carrot to see if he'd get a bit cosy with them. He didn't. He just said, no, I'll welcome all people and we'll talk, welcome all, congratulations for all over the world, and we'll talk to them just like we talk to everyone else and deal with it in due course. He hasn't been a puppy and just had his belly tickled. He's been strong. And the real sort of elephant in the room when it comes to why hasn't why didn't Scott Morrison, for example, think of telling the Chinese to lift the trade? Well, they just weren't talking. There was no dialogue whatsoever, so you can't actually raise these things. There is at least the possibility of a dialogue with a new government, and I don't say that to blame Scott Morrison for being too tough on China. We had to be tough. But the fact of the matter is that unlike in China, in Australia, the prospect of a democratic change of government allows a kind of reset that might enable us to push back a bit and get some stuff back without the Chinese losing face or without us making any concessions.
See, Erin, I think I've worked out why Joe's had such a great smile for the past couple of years, because obviously Joe and I have now traded places where Joe's going to have to defend everything and I get to attack everything. So I'm expecting to smile like Joe used to. Enjoy the show, it'll be fun. There'll be days where you go, really?
Very exhausting.
Really? Yeah, all right. I want to talk here about fixing Parliament, making, our democracy better. Sure, we can still poke fun at the appearance, apparently, of Peter Dutton. That's fine. But we're going to fix Parliament because the Tiffany Teals wanted to be a kinder, gentler place. Albo's already said that he might delay Parliament coming back till after the school holidays to be more family friendly. Okay, rightio. I think everyone getting $200,000 a year is fairly family friendly. But anyway, what do you think about the promises, though, of fixing Parliament, Erin? Now, obviously, the Tiffany Teals don't understand. They're not in opposition. They're not in government. They just get to sit at the end. They kind of take turns asking questions. But with a crossbench that has now, got a dozen people on it, it's literally going to be one question from each of these people per sitting of Parliament, let alone per question time. I think they're going to get very frustrated, which is why, of course, they'll go off to their spiritual home as the new ambassadors for the new country that was established on the weekend, the United States of Radio National.
Look, I don't know what they're doing. If someone was willing to pay me $200,000 a year to do absolutely nothing, I'd be taking it, not fighting for the opportunity to do any more work whatsoever. Look, I think the result of the election shows that Australians are pretty disenchanted with politics at the moment. I don't think Parliament works particularly well. I think one of the things that have been proposed is getting rid of the Dorothy Dixes. And look, I don't think that anyone thinks that they aren't a monumental waste of time. They don't make the 6 p.m. news. They don't make the newspapers. They're pathetic, to be honest. So I'd be happy with that element, but giving the crossbenchers more time to ask questions. I mean, Lord, we waste enough time in Parliament as it is, I think, without allowing that to happen more frequently.
But also, Joe, it's really a trick of limiting the number of questions that the opposition is going to get, which of course means that essentially you limit the number of attacks. So, like all crises, use it to your advantage. I see this as the Labor turning it into you know what? Every Tiffany Teal should get a question and Peter Dutton can have one at the very end.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of that. I mean, obviously, every time a new government comes to power, they try and find a way to maximise their impact in question time, whether that comes down to being able to choose their own speaker or reducing the actual amount of time. I think Paul Keating famously tried to reduce it and said it was a complete waste of time and energy, even though that was the place where he performed his best. But I would say of the Teals, though, these people are the last
Teals,
to be raising questions of behaviour and standards of behaviour in politics. I mean, you only have to look at the ugliness of the campaigns on the ground. I mean, gosh, what a surprise that in all the altercations we saw, all the defacements, all the vandalism, it all just seemed to happen in seats where the Teals were trying to topple the Libs.
I was just on
Tiffany
the phone
Teal.
to Josh Frydenberg checking in, and he's a perfect example. Look at the defacing of his posters and so many other people.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Tim Wilson's home got defaced. The Caulfield's at the side of his own house got vandalised, I think, 3 times. I spoke to someone this morning who was there in Kooyong and said it was just toxic. It was angry old men marching up to young female volunteers in the Libs and screaming at them. And in case you don't believe it, it was actually caught on camera by Josh Frydenberg when Simon Holmes at court did the exact same thing to a female Liberal senator, despite her pleas for him to get out of her face, and then issued the world's saltiest apology afterwards. So the idea that these people would lecture others on standards of political behaviour when their own founder is behaving like that, honestly, beggars belief. I mean, if I wrote that in a satirical column, my editor would send it back and say, come on, mate, make it at least a bit realistic.
Yeah. Now, also, look, no surprise, Twitter full of gloating at the moment. We are at peak Guardian, peak Twitter at the moment, but of course I still contest it ain't real life. And Kathy Lett, who is an Australian, of course, lives in overseas, decided to point away, say things about Jenny Morrison that were deeply unpleasant. It started a whole bunch of garbage on Twitter in the past couple of days. Look, I get it, victory laps, fair enough, but well, Erin, you're the authority on how nasty this stuff can get, especially from people who claim to give us stuff about how to treat women.
Oh, absolutely. And look, there are nasty people and there is abuse on the left and the right of politics. There are nasty elements to every bit of society. But what frustrates me about this, and for starters, the criticism of Jenny Morrison is so often on her appearance, which I thought would be the antithesis of feminism and what that is supposed to achieve. But when someone on the right even says something contentious, women on the left come out in droves. Not only do they attack them, call them out, they try to get them cancelled. When she does this to Jenny Morrison, where are all the women on the left who consider themselves and call themselves feminists, who jump up and fight for the right of women to not be judged on their appearance, yada, yada, yada? They're nowhere. They're completely silent. The hypocrisy is so annoying. The other thing that she seems to be criticised for is standing by her husband. I don't understand why a woman supporting her partner is against feminism either. I just think that there is so much that is corrosive about this whole element of society that is just so hypocritical as well. I just found it appalling. It's based on her appearance. It used to happen to me all the time in football. It'd be what dress I was wearing or what I looked like, rather than, criticise the content or what I'm saying. Go for God, that's fair game. Don't criticise me because of what I'm wearing or what I look like. That's pathetic, and it shows you've got nothing better to argue or nothing better to say.
Look, I get it. After a long fight, people get very excited. But again, you can get overly excited. And sometimes how you win and the things you say that you win are what sows the seeds of an upcoming defeat. No win is forever. No loss is forever. That's always the truth. Love you guys. Nice to talk to you. Thank you so much, Joe. And a unicorn wearing glasses. Well done, Erin. Let's get plenty
I'm
more
blind.
to talk about here on Paul Murray Live.